Welcome back, everybody, to the Lion's Den. Today, we speak with Deborah Heiser, PhD, founder of the Mentor Project. This was a really cool conversation. Deborah began a lot of her research studying aging and what happens to us as we age. And she was getting very deep into a lot of the sort of negative impacts of aging, which many of us know about and are afraid of. And Deborah, at a certain point, ended up making a shift in her research and in her focus, where she started going down the road of what are the positive ways to use our expertise as we age. And it took her down this road of learning about and studying and basically building out an entire playbook and eventually nonprofit organization around mentorship. And so this conversation is all about mentorship, what mentoring is, what it is not, how to find a mentor, how to be a mentor. And I think this is really valuable for everyone out there to think about as you get older, how are you going to give back and mentor and get those positive effects that come from it? Give it a listen. Deborah, welcome to the Lion's Den.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. I'm excited to talk to you today. We've got you're a very sort of like you have a lot of credentials and you've done a lot of research and you are a professor at universities and you've done TED Talks and all sorts of things. So I want to pick your brain about your expertise. And based on the research I was doing before this, it sounds like you have done a lot of work in the field of aging, positive and negative psychological, emotional impacts of aging. So I would love to maybe hear from you, what was your research really sort of centered around?
Sure. I started out as an aging researcher looking at everything no one ever wants to encounter, like depression, frailty, Alzheimer's, all of that stuff. And when I was looking at all of that, I was really excited about it because I really thought it was important to be able to help people who are older recover from depression because my grandmother suffered from depression. And that's why I became a psychologist, was because I wanted to fix grandmas. And I pivoted to look at the good things that we want to look at in life because I was so really excited about myself, and the work that I was doing. I kind of really thought a lot about myself at that moment. I was young and I was doing a lot of work, and I went to a conference and was so excited to tell everybody all about me, and this great work. And it was a big dud. It was a total flop. Somebody said to me, right after I told them about all the work I do, so what do we have to look forward to when we age? And I was completely stumped. I was like, well, less frailty, less depression. And he said, so you're telling me we have nothing to look forward to. In fact, we're just putting a Band-Aid on horrible things that we have to look forward to. And so I essentially left tail between my legs, like feeling terrible about, the way that I went into this. It was very humbling. And I pivoted and I said, I need to find out what we have to look forward to. So I started to look at all the research and all the theories that we don't really talk a lot about, that look at not our physical aging, but our emotional aging. And Eric Erickson started that. He really did take a look at that decades ago. And a bunch of people have come on board and have further researched what he did. But essentially, we get happier as we grow older. Our emotional track is one that we all want to experience. And by pivoting and learning that at midlife, it's really the peak of where we start to really feel all the amazing emotional, benefits of having grown up that we get to experience. So that's where I am now. I still look at that. I still research that. I'm into it. And that's it.
Got it. Awesome. Awesome. Okay. So let's maybe before we dive into the positive stuff, and I definitely want to get to the positive stuff. I want to talk a little bit about some of the downsides of aging, but specifically, a lot of our listeners are, I would say most of our listeners are entrepreneurs, they're business owners. So what do they need to like look out for as they age? And I guess we can break it into a couple pieces too, while they're running their business, what do they need to look out for as they age? But then also like once they sell it and they retire, what are sort of the downfalls that many entrepreneurs might feel?
Oh, this is a great one. And a lot of the clients that I see are people who have retired, and they say, my whole identity was my work. And
Mhm.
it doesn't matter if you're a teacher, or you're a lawyer, or you're a CEO, or whatever. It does not matter. We often use our business card as our identity card. And so the biggest thing to know is that we need to know who we are outside of work. So who are you, and meaning, what is your identity outside of work? If that's taken away from you right away, we should be starting to think of about that as early as we go into starting to work. Like, who are we? And that is a buffer for when you go to retire, because you have more to look forward to. It may be that you say, hey, I know that outside of here, I have not just golf or hobbies, but I have passions that drive me and that will allow me to feel like my footprint is relevant in the world. So preparing for that, that's not as hard as people think. That is um, usually obtained by making connections with others. So when
Mhm.
we connect with others, we're able to talk with them and relate with them in ways where you can sort of find out, you're expressing yourself. You're essentially working on your identity when you're talking with people, letting them know who you are. And that's a really big help. And then the final part that I would suggest is, if you can begin mentoring early on, it helps you so that you see how you can remain relevantly connected and keep your legacy going. Most people think that if you're an entrepreneur and you sell your business, it's gone. Or if you are in a corporate setting or any kind of business setting and you leave, it's done. You're no longer there. When you're mentoring, you see that you live on in every little piece of what it could be, even the bylaws of your organization, whatever it is, you're living on in that. And that's what really helps people feel like they can leave it while still remaining connected.
Okay. And yeah, maybe let's just jump into mentorship now since you brought it up. And I mean, I see your book behind you, The Mentorship Edge. I know you founded the Mentor Project. So I mean, is this, when you shifted from some of the downsides of aging, the things to look out for, the inevitabilities of aging, when you started to shift into the positive side of it, is that what brought you to this whole sort of theory and practice around mentorship?
Yes. Here's why. Look, we can all expect some negatives in our life. And I like to think of that as an inverted V. When you think of aging, you think of the physical journey that we're taking. And that's a steep incline where you learn how to walk, run, do all of the things that you do, get good at video games with your eye hand coordination. And then there's a slow, steady decline. Now, I'm right in the middle of midlife, and I cannot run as fast as somebody younger, but I don't care. What we forget is that we have an emotional journey. I wear glasses now. I never wore glasses before. I don't care. There are all of these physical things that people will say, oh my gosh, I'm going to feel a sense of loss my whole way through. And we really don't as we go forward. And I didn't realize that because our emotions are on a whole different trajectory. So, that being said, one of the things in midlife that's the key to us feeling that good stuff while we're even declining in whatever we're doing, um, physically, is it's called generativity. This is a term that was coined by Eric Erickson, the developmental theorist, and it's where we care for others without expecting anything in return.
Hmm.
And so I thought to myself, okay, here's something good going on. What's happening here? And we can be generative in three different ways: volunteering, philanthropy, and mentoring. And I thought, well, I don't have enough money to name a building after myself. Philanthropy's out. Volunteering's great. I could be a docent at the zoo, or I could go do some other things. And I often do volunteer. I volunteer for a lot. But mentoring is the only one where you're giving a piece of yourself, you're leaving a legacy, you're making your footprint, because it's you in there that you're giving to somebody else. So I thought, wow, we are wasting our most precious natural resources, which is all of our experts. Every time a person retires, we're burning down a library of knowledge and expertise in what that person held and everybody else. So I thought, wow, let me look at mentorship.
Hmm.
And I started to see that everyone was talking about mentorship from the mentee perspective. So it's all young people starting out at work saying, I'd like a mentor. And I'm told I have to get a mentor. And the mentor is a nameless, faceless individual.
Hmm.
that we're supposed to go find this elusive individual. Well, I thought, let me interview a whole bunch of people who will claim that they've mentored and see what they have to say. So, from a four-star general to grandma, I did like 50 interviews with people to find out what the deal was. The core was the same for all of them. It didn't matter who it was. They all felt relevant. They felt useful. They felt like they had some kind of a purpose in life, that they mattered. It was more meaningful than anything I'd ever heard from somebody explaining how their mentor changed their life, the mentee.
Hmm.
Um, so they got to feel like they have like a sense of immortality. So all of these really high level people had no access to mentors and to mentees. And it's not like if you're a retired person, you can go out to a park and say, "Hey kid, can I teach you quantum mechanics?" It's just not a good look. So, you know, what do you do with these people? So we started the mentor project to get just a couple of really huge leaders, like the father of the firewall and a woman who was the lead on the mission to Mercury for NASA, to get them into schools to see, what would happen. And they loved it. And,
Hmm.
and the mentor project grew. Everyone said, no one's going to have time for it. The top 1% will not want to do it. They're going to feel like it's a burden. No, we went from 10 to 60 in 6 months, then to 80, then to more than 100. We have a waiting list. It's ongoing. Everyone, I don't reach out. They come and ask to become mentors. It's
Hmm.
something people are built to do. They want to do it. And the mentor project was built on that developmental milestone that's a part of aging, that is now the core of how and why we operate.
Wow. That's really cool. So then the mentor project, I mean, you mentioned the top 1% and you mentioned a couple of like incredibly intelligent people, incredibly accomplished people. But it seems like the same sort of thing would be valuable for, like I said, our listeners who are entrepreneurs. They've run a business for 30 years, they've knocked it out of the park, they exited, and now they're like, what the hell do I do with my time? And they're feeling a little bit of depression. Their identity is gone all of a sudden. Mentorship seems like a great place to sort of direct their energy. Um, is it? But like you said, they can't just go to the park. So, I mean, how would those sorts of people? How would they find a mentee?
So there are some ways, we are one of the first that's looking at the mentor and how we can connect mentors with mentees. Most are looking at, let's find some, you don't know who the mentors are and they say they connect people and all of that. One thing is to go
Hmm.
to your organization. I mean, like, look, there's EO, there's YPO, there are these organizations, they do mentoring. You can
Hmm.
check out the mentor project. The ways that you can mentor are, find your passion that means something to you, that you say, this, if somebody's going to remember me, what do I want them to remember from me and about me? And so that
Hmm.
could be a house of worship. That could be any kind of an organization that you have been really passionate about and you know a lot about, and you can mentor somebody in that. It could be that you say, I'm going to go to a university and I'm going to get involved in that way. It's endless. It's that we forget that we don't just have to stand out in our front yard and say, hey, why is no one coming up to me looking for my expertise? It's
Hmm.
almost like job hunting in a way. You have to get yourself out there and
Okay.
connected. And again, that word connection is the key to all of this.
Yeah. And you're probably right. If I were to just go into Google right now and type in become a mentor, there's probably 100 different things that pop up and I can start to go down that path and
Yeah.
contact people and figure it out that way. Okay. Is being a mentor different than, I know you're a mother of a couple of sons, baseball players we were talking about before this. Is being a mentor, like, how does it differ from just being a parent?
So look, you're expected as a parent to guide your kids. It's different if you're a grandparent. That's really, I mean, of course we
Mm,
mentor our children. But I'm going to tell you the difference here. Um, and yes, I can say that we can all argue back and forth. The jury is out on this, whether parents are mentors or not. I tend to say, um, you're supposed to be doing this. It's
mhm.
parenting. I wouldn't call it mentoring necessarily in that respect.
Yeah.
I would switch it to grandparents to being the mentors. But here's the deal. When you're a mentor, you have to have five basic components that make you a mentor. One is, if you're paid, you're not a mentor. End of story.
Okay.
Maybe you're a
Okay.
coach, you're an advisor, you're something else, but you're not a mentor.
Hmm.
Um, and the other thing is when you are a mentor, you are really looking to be doing something for intrinsic motivation. And what that means is that you are doing it for the love of it. Nobody can stop you. Like my kids play baseball. That I can't tell you how many bats are around my house. Every time they come home from college, there's a ball laying around. I mean, truly, I'm tripping over baseball stuff. No one has to make them play. Nobody's like, have you practiced today? It's not like piano. They're doing it because they love it. Um, Likewise, if you are a reader, you like to do, crossword puzzles or things like that. No one has to pay you to do it. Now, if I said to you, hey, Nico, would you like to go volunteer time at a soup kitchen? You might say yes. And then you'd feel good about that, right? Because you're doing something good. Now I say, hey,
Hmm.
Nico, go volunteer your time at Starbucks for no pay. You're not going to want to do that same activity. Hungry, thirsty people are coming to you for stuff and you're giving it out. Why does that feel different to you? It's because one has an extrinsic motivation, and that's money. And you feel like a schmuck if you're not getting paid, right? And the other
Hmm.
one, if somebody paid you, you'd be like, no, 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 I'm going to do this from the goodness of my heart. The same thing happens with mentorship. And so if a person is saying, I want to get involved in mentoring, you have to be in a place that is like the soup kitchen feeling, not the Starbucks feeling. You have to be in a place where you're saying, I would do this for no money because I love it. It's a part of me. That's the key right here. The meaningful connection has to exist. You no one wants to give away their expertise to somebody who doesn't want it. Have you ever given a gift to somebody and they open it up and you're like, wow, I feel amazing. They loved their gift. Well, a mentor feels that way when they're mentoring, when somebody's like, wow, you opened a door for me and did something life changing for me or solved a problem for me. Imagine that mentee instead gets the gift of your knowledge, or you're saying, I'd like this. And they're like, no, thanks. Just like if you had given somebody a gift and they're like, I've got enough already. Thanks. That's that's how I like to talk about mentorship in terms of how we are naturally already interacting and feeling in the world. And we have to put that to mentorship so it doesn't feel like it is an activity, but it's a way of life.
Got it. Okay. And so what was, you mentioned a couple pretty amazing people that are part of the mentor project. Um do you have any like mentor mentee stories that have really stood out? Okay, yeah, would love to hear
Oh,
some.
yeah, we've got a bunch. So Justin Thompson, he's the senior artist at Schultz Creative Studios. So if you think of Snoopy, that's him. He's the guy who's trademarked to go out and draw Snoopy and all of that stuff. If you see big murals around the world, that's him. He'll be holding Snoopy at the Thanksgiving Day parade this year. That's the guy. So I like to think of the Mentor Project as like Make a Wish for mentors. Like they come and say how they'd like to mentor. I don't say, hey, here's what you're going to do, because that's
Mhm.
volunteering. That's not something that's like putting them in Starbucks.
Right.
So he said, I would love to be able to teach art to, kids who don't get exposure to cartooning. Because cartooning is an art that's not the same as it was when I was young and you opened up the Sunday paper and you saw the cartoons. So he wants to keep it relevant. So we sent him to Shirati, Tanzania, a village of 500 with 500 students, and he was able to mentor them for more than about 10 days in how to do emotions through cartooning. And it was transformative. He did a mural and was helping people. The whole community came out. It wasn't just the kids, it was a whole community. And it changed their way of thinking in many ways. So we went back the following year and we sent him again, and 500 kids again, the community. Now he's going to be working with kids in Brooklyn through New York Edge. It's an after
Mhm.
school program. And he's going to be merging the kids in Tanzania with the kids in Brooklyn so that they can meet up over art and cartooning. So that's one example. We've also had students who patented and started their own companies, because we have some of the most prolific patenters in our mentor list. Um, we've had students who have come in and been able to figure out ways to get internships. We have two students in high school, one from Mexico City and one from Virginia, who were 15 and learned how to do systematic review research, which I didn't learn in graduate school. And they're going to be on peer-reviewed journal articles. I wasn't on peer-reviewed journal articles in high school. Most people aren't. So some of the things that they're doing are really transformative in their lives. And it's because they have the top people who are teaching them how to do it and mentoring them along the way and how they can utilize that. That's just a few. We have just
Wow.
this year, in not very many months, because we were flipping we were getting a new platform going up for our mentor-mentee engagement.
Mhm.
More than $2 million of mentoring hours have been given out just in a few months this year.
Wow, that's crazy. So are you guys like actively growing your mentor pool?
We're not looking for more mentors. People come to us and ask to become mentors. We have a
Mhm.
very rigid onboarding process. They have to get background checks and do a whole long list of
Mhm.
questionnaires, and they have to meet with a psychologist and somebody else. They have a lot that they have to do, which nobody cares about. They're all fine with it.
Mhm.
We're always looking to increase our mentee outreach. We're in 5 countries now, but our goal is to reach like 1 billion kids around the world so that we can make, and by kids, I'm old, so I say that loosely, students, it could be any age, K through universities, they could be 36 and graduate school, whatever the deal is.
Mhm.
That's our goal.
Wow, that's awesome. So let's maybe talk about the
By the
book.
way, this is for
Oh,
free. Everything is free. No mentee
the
pays it.
mentorship, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the Mentorship Edge, the book that you have pictured right behind you. So tell me about that book. Is it the same sorts of ideas we've been talking about?
So in the mentorship edge, I really try to break down what mentorship is and what it isn't. And
Mhm.
I talk about stories about the difference between hierarchical and lateral. And I give some really, practical advice on how these things can be applied in the workplace and at home.
Okay.
One of the stories that really captures a lot of this is the story of Charlie Camarda, our astronaut. And if you set yourself back to 2003, the Columbia Space Shuttle was re-entering Earth's orbit and it disintegrated to the horror of everybody watching. And to, fast forward 2 years later, 2005, imagine yourself in space. You've always wanted to be there. You've finally gotten there. You are looking around and saying, this is everything I dreamed of and more. And then you get a call saying your mission might have the same problem that the Columbia Space Shuttle had. And it's not like you can open the door and say, let me out. It's not like you can do any of that. And it's the coming home that is the problem. So Charlie Camarda was that astronaut on that mission. And
Mhm.
he was there. And what do you do in that kind of a situation? This is a life or death situation. He wasn't getting a clear answer from NASA about whether or not there was a true problem. So Charlie happens to have a little black book with him that he calls his friends of Charlie, but it's everybody that's the most close person to him, including professionals like engineers who know the mission and everything like that, that he doesn't work with, but who are his friends. And he brought that with him to space. And he actually made a phone call in space to an engineer colleague. And he said, am I going to live or die? What's going to happen? Do I have to make a phone call to my family or what's going to happen? And he said, let me take a look. He said, I think you're going to have to do a spacewalk to make this, to make it home alive because your mission has the same tile loose that
Mhm.
was the demise of the previous shuttle. So Charlie talked with his crew and he said, I think we need to do a spacewalk. They called NASA. They said, we're doing a spacewalk. They made it home safely. That guy in his little black book that he called is a lateral mentor. It's somebody that most people would say, well, he just called a friend. No, he called somebody with expertise he didn't have. He was
Mhm.
guided through this by somebody who knew more about this than he did. And so our mentors are those kind of people. That's what I call a lateral mentor.
Mhm.
Um, and that is, most people think, oh, well, that's a peer mentor. No, a lateral mentor is anybody who's lateral to you, not hierarchical, And we tend to go to these people. We're doing this all the time without even realizing it. Um, and this engagement is something that makes some of the biggest impact in our tech industries, in entrepreneurship, because people are reaching out to people that they feel comfortable being vulnerable around. Charlie
Hmm.
was able to say, "Oh my gosh, I trust this guy. I don't know if NASA's going to have the right answers, but I know this guy will tell me the truth." And so he trusted him. And how many times in business have you called upon somebody to say, "Hey, give me the right answer here, guide me, show me"? Entrepreneurship is all about that. It's built on lateral mentoring. And so Charlie's example is one that I give in the book about lateral mentoring to show the difference between hierarchical, with which many of us think, well, I'm just going to wait around until I need to go a couple levels up the rung on the ladder. And really, we don't have to wait for that. We can be utilizing mentors laterally every single day for everything we ever want to do. And
Yeah.
there's 8 billion people in the world, so there's no excuse to not have a mentor.
Yeah, no, and that's an interesting point. And you're right, there is a lot of that in entrepreneurship, and there should be even more of it. And I think some business owners or executives or employees or whatever, they're afraid to go laterally, or they're too proud to go laterally, or something like that. It's almost like they see it as their competition in many ways, and you can't ask them for help. But if you're a business owner and you join an entrepreneurial community of other business owners, and you're actually like, you do ask for advice and you are a little bit vulnerable, I mean, you can pull so much knowledge out of that, to your point.
Well, here's the difference with that, because everything you're saying is true, and this is what I hear from people. You're taking something like networking and connections. They are not automatically mentors.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
we can turn them into mentors, but we have to have
Hmm.
that meaningful connection with that person. So that's why a person feels like, well, I can't tell somebody about what I want to do or get advice because they'll steal my idea. Well, you're not going to steal the idea of somebody that you really care about. I mean, that doesn't happen that often. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe there's an occasional jerk out there, but that tends not to be how it works.
Yeah.
So the main thing is, yes, make your connections, but do not think that networking is a pool of mentors. You have to sift through those guys. Charlie didn't bring every giant yellow phone book filled with engineers. He only had a few, the closest people that he knew were the smartest, that he trusted. So the trust is the key there. And
Yeah.
so if you're an entrepreneur, you will know who you trust, and you will want to work on fostering as many close, real, legitimate connections that you can, so that you can say, I know I can trust this person. They're not going to undermine me.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So hierarchical, lateral, what else do you talk about in the book?
I talk about what mentoring is and isn't.
Hmm.
So, like I mentioned, how, if you're paid, you're not a mentor. So,
Hmm.
so often people will say, well, I'm going to get myself a coach. And if I get a coach, that person's also a mentor. No, a coach is a coach. They're getting paid. A mentor is not paid. So, a coach, Starbucks, mentor, soup kitchen. Like, you have to really think
Hmm.
about it in terms of how are they motivated. Coaches all the time say to me, well, I'm a coach and a mentor. And I say, well, do you bill your client when you're mentoring them? Why, yes. Then you're not mentoring them, you're coaching them.
Right. Yeah.
So I talk about what it is and isn't, and how networking can turn into mentoring, how coaching can, end up being mentoring, how having an advisor is different than mentoring, but it could turn into it. So you can turn any of these into mentoring, but the assumption most people have is that they have both at the same time, and we
Yeah.
don't. So I talk about what it is and what it isn't.
Hmm.
I also talk about some of the actionable steps, and I give different examples of how it looks differently, because if you look at entrepreneurship, that is not a clean book to write, because entrepreneurship looks different from every entrepreneurial lens from the organization they're building. It could be a nonprofit, it could be a for-profit. What's the area? Is it tech? Is it, what? It's endless. So if we look at hierarchical mentoring or lateral mentoring, it can look different in two different ways. So I just gave you the example of Charlie in space and the example of Latanya, who is at Colgate Palmolive in a research position. She's a senior vice president, global tech, all of that. She was at a conference and she had been tasked with finding one of the main things they do at Colgate Palmolive is look at oral health. And they were looking to make a new breakthrough in oral health and the microbiomes in our mouths and making sure that they can make everything healthier and better. And there was a piece missing that they were she hit a wall with, and they weren't getting the answers through their team. She remembered that she went to a conference and sat next to a lady who worked in the dog food division at like Hills Science. And the woman was working on the microbiome of dogs and how you can get good dog food. Now, most people wouldn't have put that together, but she said, let me connect with this person and see what I can see if she can guide me in any way. And she did. They made a big breakthrough in how they can apply this microbiome thing that they found with dogs to humans. And so that's the kind of thing that if you're in an entrepreneurial situation, you might be meeting somebody, you put it in your mind, okay, I just met this person. And it may not be until 7 years later that that person might become a mentor to you. But when we do make those connections, we have the ability to then reach in there and find, more mentors. So lateral doesn't look the same across the board. Every instance is going to look a little bit different in who the pool is coming from, where you're finding your person, who you can trust, and all of that. But those examples hierarchically and laterally are throughout the book. And I'll tell you, lateral is mostly entrepreneur. Our tech revolution was built on lateral mentoring. The founding of our country, all the founding fathers were lateral mentors. None of them had this expertise. They all came together. So really entrepreneurship, lateral mentorship are like two peas in a pod.
Got it. On the hierarchical piece, I'm kind of curious, like within an organization, you usually have a hierarchy that's already there, a reporting hierarchy, managerial hierarchy. How have you seen mentoring be like, I guess, rolled out well within an organization, or if you formalize it, is it bound to fail and it has to just happen organically? Like, what's your take on that?
So, yes, in many ways it should happen organically, but it's not going to. If you go to a hospital, if you go to a corporate setting, it is hierarchical, period, end of story. Can you infuse lateral in there? Yes. But you still need the hierarchical. You need to go up the rung to get your next job, which isn't the same in entrepreneurship. But what you can do well that I've seen done well, there are a couple of people that do it really well. One is Miriam Burdella. She was at a Harvard hospital. I think she's at NYU now. I write about her in the book. What they do is they really try to make it so that you are put with someone that you have trust with. That trust factor is really there. That key is there. And they, if it's not working out, they move to somebody else. They have a whole network also so that people who are in the hierarchy, you can go to look at, even if you're assigned to somebody. The best one I've seen is the one that I talked about with Latanya Kilpatrick, who's at Colgate Palmolive. They have so many different ways to employ mentoring. You are assigned people, but you don't have to stick with that person. They also have like networking events within the organization so that people can go and meet other people. And part of the mentor's job at that corporation is to get them outside of just their lane and get them introduced to other departments so that those mentees, if they don't feel a full trust with one person, they're going to be able to find somebody else that they do. It could be hierarchical, but 2 departments over. So if you say, I don't know what I'm doing. Yeah, this is eluding me. You can talk to somebody else who isn't your boss. The other thing they do is they employ coaching in addition to it. They're different people, different places, different everything. And so a person can have that relationship that is a mentor relationship that's more close and connected and has that sort of trust vibe versus coaching, which, I'm a coach. I hope people trust me and have that vibe with me. but it's different. It's a job. I am there to make sure that you reach your goal. I'm goal oriented as the sort of higher piece there. And mentoring, it's more like trust and then goal, which is the difference. But they do it really well at Colgate, and it's because they put so many options out there for you that it can feel organic, even though it's not.
Got it. Okay. Okay. Well, it sounds like in the book you've got a bunch of different sort of case studies and examples and what mentoring is, what it's not, and um, it sounds like if somebody were to read the book, they would really sort of intimately understand. Okay, what do I need to do to find a mentor, and how can I be a good mentor? So I think it would be very useful for a lot of people, especially a lot of our listeners who are, business owners, and especially those getting a little further in their careers and feeling like they need some sort of give back thing happening. I think it would be a good book for them.
I hope so.
I Yeah, so I would love to wrap up here. Is there anything else we didn't hit on that you would love to leave the listeners with?
I would just like to leave the listeners with, you are already mentoring. You may not know it, but you are. And you are leaving your footprint and your legacy in so many ways that you don't know. But it's much more fun to be able to acknowledge it and know that you are, because it's really cool to get to see in your own ways, how you're making your impression in the world. So I hope that you'll take that away, make great connections, and start acknowledging your mentorship.
Awesome. Thank you, Deborah. Well, we will link to mentorproject.org. We will link to your book so people can download that book, purchase that book. And otherwise, thank you very much for joining me in the Lion's Den.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.